Right, types of chemical reactions. In chemistry, we learned four major types of chemical reactions. But what is a chemical reaction? Now, I'd like to introduce you to this word rearrangement. A chemical reaction is a rearrangement of the molecular or the ionic structure of substances when it goes through some sort of change. And this change can involve the formation of a precipitate or a solid in the container. That's oftentimes in chemistry how we can determine that. So how do you know if a chemical reaction has occurred? And like we talked in the chemical and physical change video, there's usually the production of something, like the production of a gas or a solid, or light, or a color change here. And there's sometimes there's a smell, there's a temperature change, there can be a variety of things, but usually there's something that we can actually see and measure that has occurred and that we can determine if a chemical reaction has occurred. There are parts to a chemical reaction that you will need to know. Here I have a very basic chemical reaction. N2 plus H2 makes NH3, which is nitrogen gas plus hydrogen gas makes ammonia. And there are parts to the chemical reaction. This is an arrow. This arrow means that it yields something, or it transforms into something, or it rearranges something, or it creates a new product of sorts. So the arrow is the transformation. So here I have N2 and H2, and collectively these are the things that are about to transform. They are what we call the reactants. On the right side of the arrow, right here, is the new thing that is created out of the old things, and that's what we call the products. So the chemical reaction has really three parts. This whole thing right here is called a chemical equation, where I have reactants and some sort of transformation or yields, and then products. Okay, so for determining the type of reaction, you're going to have to be able to recognize this whole process in 5 different ways. So let's just talk definition here for a second. We have a synthesis reaction, a decomposition, a single replacement reaction, or a double replacement reaction, and a combustion reaction. A synthesis reaction is usually when we have two, or more, and they combine to form one product. Okay, so 2 or more things that form to combine one product. A decomposition would be just the opposite. That would basically be the breakup of one species or one chemical compound. All right, that's the breakup of one, usually into many, 2 or many. All right, a single replacement involves an uncombined element. That uncombined element is usually a metal of sorts, and it recombines with something else. Like there's a single guy, there's a single thing that will bond with something else. A double replacement will usually involve 2 cations and 2 anions that change places. So you have one chemical reaction and another chemical reaction, and they will swap partners. They will change places with each other. And then a combustion reaction involves what we call a hydrocarbon that will usually react or burn to form some sort of gas, and it's usually carbon dioxide and water. Okay, so that is a combustion reaction typically, and they have AB forms. Now to write these AB forms, I'm going to erase this part, so pause the video, take a second to write those down if you like. An AB form is just a general form or an outline form of how the reaction occurs. So a synthesis, which is the formation of one thing, I have some compound A or element or compound B, and they're going to react to form AB, a single compound. In decomposition, we see quite the opposite. We see one species that decomposes into A plus B. Now, in a single replacement, there's usually one lonely guy, and there's oftentimes, a compound with a cation and anion component, and then usually this single guy is positive. It's a metal, it's a cation, and so it's going to change places with the other cation, making B kind of kicked out, and then AC. And this is a very basic way of describing a single replacement. Now in a double replacement, we have usually two ionic compounds, a cation and the anion, and another cation and anion. And remember what you learned in bonding was that you had to have a positive and a negative thing to interact. So this positive is going to go with that negative, and that positive with that negative. And so we form AD plus CB. And this is a AB form of a double replacement reaction. Now a combustion might look a little different, but there's always some sort of what we call hydrocarbon, which is some sort of hydrogen, carbon component, and they come in a variety of different quantities and numbers and sizes. And if you remember from the alcohol labs, you got to see lots of them with different sizes. Now they often react with oxygen, and that's usually due to burning, and they will form carbon dioxide and water. So when you look at these 5 different AB forms, these are just the general forms of 5 different types of chemical reactions. And the first thing you're going to have to be able to do is look at it and decide if what 5 type that it is. Which of these 5 types that it is. Now here I have colored diagrams of the reactions, of which I will show you in a better image here shortly. But let me explain the color diagrams, and you can choose how to put it into your notes here. But here I have A plus B, and they combine to form an AB or a single compound. Here I have AB, and they come apart into A and into B. Here I have a single replacement, which is A, which is the cation, and it is going to bond with the other guy's anion, making A into a compound. And right here, my blue and green guy, those are B and C. So A is going to combine to form AC, and little b is going to be kicked out, and he's going to be all by himself. In the double replacement, I have AB plus CD. So this is one compound, and this is another compound. And they're basically going to switch cation and anion partners. So this cation with that anion, and that cation with that anion, turning ABCD into... Oh, I got that wrong. Hold on. Okay. Into, sorry about that, AD plus CB. That's a plus sign. So it's just a diagram that shows you how the molecules have been rearranged, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about rearrangement. And let me give you some examples of these rearrangements. Give you a second if you'd like to copy that down. For a synthesis where H2 plus O2 combine to make water. Hydrogen gas and oxygen gas combine to form water. Or a decomposition would be just the opposite of that, where water decomposes to form H2 plus O2 gas. Now a single replacement and a double replacement I need a little more room for, so I'm going to erase some of this here. I'll give you a second if you have to copy anything else down. It usually has to do with the metal. So for example, zinc and copper 2 chloride, okay, they react, and what's going to happen is that copper and zinc are going to change places because those are the cations, and I have zinc chloride and copper. So in a single replacement reaction, one single guy has taken the place of the other and kind of like kicked him out, and there's a new compound and a new element. In a double replacement reaction, two things are going to switch places. So here I have dinitrogen sulfide and hydrochloric acid. There's my cation and my anion. There's my cation and my anion. And so they are just going to swap places. Sodium sulfide, disodium sulfide. And I'm going to make sodium chloride and dihydrogen sulfide. And so the basic idea here is that you can recognize where the positive one has gone with this negative guy and this positive one has gone with that negative guy, and they form two separate species. They have been rearranged. One of the more classic examples of combustion is we have methane, and if you burn methane in the presence of oxygen, you get water and carbon dioxide. All combustions, when they burn, much like gasoline in your tank, any octane, that's also a hydrocarbon. When you burn them in your engine, or if you light them on fire, they produce H2O and CO2.